coming in from work and should be walking in with us here shortly. With that, council, I am needing a motion of approval for the agenda, bearing nothing has changed. Sir?
No
Nothing
changes, Mayor.
Need a motion and a second, please.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Espinoza, second by Mayor Pro Tem Prout. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Alvarado,
Yes.
Prout,
Yes.
Espinoza,
Yes.
and Givens.
Yes. Okay, very good. This time we're gonna open up for public comment. Any person wishing to speak on any item included on the agenda or on any matter within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city council are invited to speak from the podium and address the city council. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes unless additional time is needed for translation. Please state your name and address for the record before making your presentation. Public comment time is open. Okay, hearing none, seeing none, public comment time is closed. With that, we are looking for a one item on consent calendar, which is the approval of the special event permit for the Shafter Chamber of Commerce 3rd of July fireworks show, which is going to be held July 3rd. I need a motion in a second for that, please. Okay. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Prout, a second by Councilmember Alvarado. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Alvarado,
Yes.
Prout,
Yeah.
Espinoza,
Yes.
and Givens.
Yes. Okay, with that, we have 3 items on the docket for our management report. Item number 1 is the introduction of draft community facility district study for police and fire services. Sir?
Sorry, Mayor and Council, just to lay some foundational background. Items 1 and 2 is introduction of 2 different studies. One is for community services, community facility districts, which would be an assessment to help offset the cost for fire and police services in new development. The second is introduction of the draft development impact fee nexus study. We have 2 different consultants presenting both items. The first item will be Copel and Gerber. Our consultant, Lynn Gerber, will be making the presentation. With the second, it is revenue and cost specialist, the consultants that prepared that report. By way of background, these are just introductory. This is just to provide some information as to the studies. There's no action being requested this evening. There will be follow-up study sessions and future council members, council meetings in which we'll bring these items back, which will afford you additional opportunities to ask additional questions. But this is just a high-level introduction of what a CFD is, what the AB 1600 study is. By way of background, the city has not had these fees in the past, like the CFD or Nexus study. Some 15, 20 years ago, the city did implement a traffic impact fee and a park fee, but neither of those fees was formally adopted. They did the studies, but they were never adopted as they should have done procedurally. These fees, as you'll hear, cover additional impact fees related to other infrastructures of the city. And so this would be a first ever that we would be looking to implement such fees. It is a common fee that cities adopt to help offset the cost for infrastructure from growth. And in my research previously, Shafter is, I think, the only city in Kern County that doesn't already have development impact fees. So that's a little bit of background. And so with that, I want to defer to Lynn with Copel and Gerber, who will make the first presentation on item number 1. Lynn?
Thank you very much, Gabe. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to share the screen and let me know if you can't see the screen at this point. Thank you very much for having us. My name is Lynn Gruber, and with me today is Scott Koppel and also Danny Kim have worked on this study for you. And what we are going to do is briefly go through the history of community facilities districts, what a CFD is, what a CFD can pay for, the formation procedures, the methodology specific to Shafter, and then the rate calculation. So Proposition 13, which was passed in 1978, that Prop 13, limited the property taxes to 1% of assessed value and limited what cities could charge to whatever percentage of the 1% that they had at that time. So that had a significant impact on the property taxes that cities received to pay for additional new development. And they needed some kind of a mechanism to help them in the future. And in 1982, the legislators Mello and Roos passed the Community Facilities District Act of 1982 as an alternative method to finance those needed improvements as well as these services. So this act community facilities districts can be formed by any agencies for improvements and services. A CFD is a specific geographic location or area that levies an annual special tax. They're formed to mitigate the impact of new development. They should be self-sufficient, meaning they should not be a drain on the city's general fund. They provide a dedicated source for ongoing maintenance or facilities. In this case, we're talking about services. So they are held in separate accounts, and then we report on them annually for transparency. If you were to use a community facilities district to pay for facilities, they can issue debt. They can also generate pay-as-you-go funding. This is just a brief list of some of the things that the CFDs can pay for. The study that we did specifically looked at police and fire services, but last night the City Council did approve the resolution of intention to form a landscape maintenance community facilities district. Danny, do you want to go ahead through the CFD formation? Or do you want me to go through it briefly?
Yeah, I can go through it.
Okay.
So basically, what would happen is a developer of a project would provide what's called a petition to form a CFD. And in that petition, it would, to streamline the process, waive certain election requirements and timing. The city would adopt a resolution of intention to form the CFD and call a public hearing to be held within no earlier than 30 days from the adoption date. And then at that public hearing, the CFD report would be received, and really in conjunction with that, we would actually do an election on the same public hearing, and then the city would adopt a resolution of formation of the CFD and do the first reading of an ordinance authorizing the levy of the special taxes. And then as is the case with how the city adopts any ordinance, it would then at the next council meeting adopt the ordinance, and then a 30 days challenge period would begin. And then at the end of that 30 days, the CFD would be authorized to start levying the special taxes.
Thank you, Danny. And the annual administration would begin after development starts, usually triggered by a building permit. Specific to Shafter, here's the methodology and the assumptions that we use. We relied on the development impact calculation and nexus study that RCS did for a lot of the city's build out information, as well as the call activity and land use distribution. We use the current law enforcement levels to determine, as determined by the city's budget, and the fire suppression budget from the county, because currently the county is providing fire services. The special taxes were calculated using the impact of new development and considering the property tax revenue that the city does receive to offset the costs of those services. We also assume that the historical call distribution by land use remains the same at build out. So this table mirrors the table that RCS provided in the development impact fee, which you'll see again later, but it has the current number of either units or square footages broken out by land use, the projected new construction, and then the totals at build out. Currently, based on the property tax dollar, the percent of the property tax dollar that the city receives, which is 0.22% of each dollar. And then we also looked at the expenditures for the total general fund and determined that of the total general fund, about just under 20% is police services, and the equivalent of about 5% if the city was paying for fire services. We calculated the property tax credit, which does not amount to too much, but we multiplied the percentage of the property tax dollar that the city receives by the percentage of the budget to get the percentage that would be allocated as a credit to each service. Using the average assessed value in Gossamer Grove, which we felt was a fairly good reflection of newer development within the city, we would expect that the city's share of their property tax bill would be about $8.60. Of that, $1.64 would be allocated as a credit for police, and 0.44 cents would be allocated to fire. Police services, this would be the build out budget. So this assumes full build out of the city and total costs of police based on the current budget. So just about $54.5 million we would expect at build out. For fire costs at build out, we're looking at almost $11.7 million.
What do you mean by build out?
So build out of the city. So when the city is completely built out, this is what we would expect the costs of those services to be.
Sir, let me, so Mayor and Council, in terms of build out is pursuant to our general plan, for any land that's developable, excluding farmland. That's what we looked at in terms of developable land, build out.
So that's 11 million, but then what would it generate for us?
In terms of,
The value or the amount that's collected?
oh, we're not there yet.
I
So,
know.
so the next few slides will get to what that amount was.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I thought it meant one of these. Okay, that's fine.
this is the actual, what the city would be expecting to pay for those services if at today's dollars, the city was built out based upon the general plan. So then we allocated those costs based on the call percentages and based on the total units or square footages it built out. And these are the amounts that we calculated. So for police services, for a single family residential, it would be about $834 per year. And for fire services, that'd be $171.63 per unit, and so on down the land uses. We then combined the police and fire, and we credited back the property tax, and these then become what we would call the justified rates. Residential would be about $1,004 per new residential unit. We ended up combining multifamily and single family because the costs were very similar. And for simplification, we combined them. So $1,004 would be the fee, the annual special tax that would be justified. Mobile homes would be justified at $145 per unit per year. And then on the commercial side, the rates are there justified, and the city staff is looking into some research on the logistics centers to determine what we think we could justify there. So again, these would be the maximums, and then the city could decide, city council would have the discretion to decide to approve something lower, but these would be the justified fees.
Okay, so really my question still was, if your value costs are at 11 million, what is the approximate cost of what you could generate? I mean, I saw that with this breakdown, but
Well-
not the total cost of what you have.
May I semi-answer that? So if I take the current residential, we have roughly 6,400 units, so let's just break it down to 6,000 residential units, because this would be a back charge on property taxes for every unit. Is that what I would understand?
This would be on the property tax bill for
Right.
all new residential. So if we assumed that we only applied this to new residential, you would be generating about $16.5 million. I didn't do the calculation all the way down. I can provide that to you though.
That's what I'm understanding out of it. So then if that's the case, take Mission Lakes at 5,300 on the build out. That's the residential alone pays for policing services in today. It's a very high amount. It doesn't feel justified when I compare residential to manufacturing at 6 cents per square foot based on even if you total build out of 12 million square foot, it doesn't justify how residential is an extraordinary amount higher than industrial manufacturing, even though industrial manufacturing has a higher call volume based on the calculations you provided than residential does. So it feels very flopped. I guess I'm just sharing my frustrations through it because it seems like that's a very high amount. By the way, we're talking $84 per month on a residential house. I don't know what that looks like. I guess it's the same idea. Someone's gonna have to account for that in property taxes, even if they're renting it. I think about inflation and $84 a month could be a lot for somebody. So yeah, it just feels very high and does not feel justified.
So just as Lynn has stated, these are the maximum amounts
I heard her say that.
justified that
Because-
pursuant to the calculations at full build out and the projected cost for the service, this is the max. But as a council, you have the discretion to do a lower amount. So so the study has to be defensible. We have to be able to justify what we would charge, right? So what this is showing is that maximum amount per the study that we can charge. We couldn't charge more than that because we can't justify. In other words, we can't defend it. They were challenged by a developer or a property owner. But the council ultimately can have the discretion to say, well, you know, they pay property tax already. They're spending money in the area, wherever the case may be. So, and that's the case, then we're gonna only charge 50% of that, right? You have that discretion.
Yeah,
What the
because-
study just shows is that.
Yeah, it stood out for me when it said the hotel was $158 per room. And I'm going, wow, you know, what am I gonna pay per rate when I go and use a room in the
But the
hotel?
per room per year, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, it's an
Mhm.
ongoing assessment.
But it's still, it could be high and you can adjust it.
Right.
All right, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. You can't go above this amount, but you can go low.
Okay.
Yes.
So then our last slide would be the inflationary adjustment. What we recommend is that if you do adopt a community facilities district and move forward with it, that in addition to determine the annual special tax rate, that you also provide for an escalator. We typically see either a fixed percent or an index such as CPI, or most often a combination of the two, such as the greater of CPI and 4%. Or something along those lines. And with that, we're open to more questions, or if you want to move on, we can do that.
Council questions, comments, or concerns?
Do most councils go with the full amount?
I would say it varies. Depends on where the rate is calculated at and what the council feels is reasonable.
The CFD assessment is not necessarily meant to do 100% cost recovery to provide the service. It's to offset that cost for the city to provide, in this case, fire or police services on an ongoing basis. We get 22 cents on the dollar for property tax, but you know, the substation, for example, right? It's probably gonna eventually run us about $3-4 million once it's fully operational 24/7. So this will offset some of that general fund cost. It may generate $1 million, $1.5 million, but you, the council, gets to set that threshold. If you want to go try to maximize the amount to collect to minimize the impact of the general fund, then you can go to the maximum amount, right? But if the city says, you as a policy says, well, you know, they're already buying a home, potentially we're gonna have commercial development out there, there's gonna be sales tax, we want to be able to promote sales and not discourage people from moving to Shafter, right? They already have other assessments. We just want to offset some of that general fund cost, then you can do at 50%, right? Instead of 1,000, it's $500 a year, and then the general fund's picking up the other amount for that service.
What happens to Melrose? If I were to build out there and we've adopted all of this, do I have to pay the Melrose as well as the new impact fee?
But this is sort of a Melrose, but this is a CFD. So if you're talking about like for
You'd still
landscaping,
pay, but you'd still pay Melrose too.
this would be in addition to just dedicated for fire and police. So right now out there, we have the LLMDs, the lighting and landscaping maintenance districts. This would be, that's dedicated for LLMDs, for landscape, the parks, lighting, to pay offset that cost. This would be an additional assessment to pay and be dedicated for fire and police.
You know, because we already hear the concerns of some that have had to pay that extra fee already out there.
And for that reason is why at a policy level,
Mhm.
council, as you heard, it varies. They may charge the maximum amount or they can lower the amount because of that. Right? Or you can do a phased in approach, you know, start at 25 and then a couple years later go up to 50 and then another, then 75 or whatever the amount may be, and you can eventually get to that
And
amount.
it just stays with those homes that were built at that time. And
Yeah, but this is only for new development.
Yeah.
So the core city, Gossamer Grove that's already built, or the future homes that Gossamer Grove's gonna build, is not gonna have that. So-
Until we sell and buy, right?
No. No, because they're weren't part of, including the DA. So like Mission Lakes right now, one of the reasons we've been extending the negotiations or set the development agreement is because we're waiting for these studies. Because Mission Lakes does include the creation of CFDs and impact fees.
but no set amount.
No set amount, right? But yeah, it would only, so the current development that we have going on in the core city, I'd say most of those don't include CFDs at all.
Not even for new homes.
Because it wasn't part of the conditions of approval when those plans were submitted. But let's say we get a brand new housing development project that is brand new and is being proposed, then these would apply to that.
What about the development at Tulare Beach?
They would not. Tulare Beach already has a condition that they would pay, I believe, like $300 per housing, but that was already a condition when the initial maps were submitted. The city put a $300 amount, right?
Okay, so we're really looking in the future, huh?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council?
So as I said, Mayor and Council, this is introductory. There'll be more information on that and we'll have future discussions on these. The next item, Mayor and Council, is the introduction of development impact fee nexus study. That will be revenue and cost specialist Gregory Brown and Scott Thorpe. And so, Greg.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I know that we're limited on time. I had a PowerPoint presentation, but I think for the sake of expediency, it may be best if I just go over the bird's eye view of what the impact fees are, what their intentions are, and then I was going to have Scott come in and kind of discuss a little bit of why Shafter is such a unique situation in our field. So, sorry, excuse me. My name is Greg Brown. I'm from Revenue Cost Specialist. I'm joined here with Scott Thorpe. He's the Senior Vice President of the firm, and we were the team that worked on the city's development impact fees. The public safety was the first portion of this study that was completed in 2021. And so today we're talking about phase 2 of the study, which is going to be the spine infrastructure and as well as the quality of life. And these will be things along the lines of circulation, water and sewer, and then quality of life, of course, is going to be libraries, aquatics, and community centers. So in a nutshell, if we're looking at everything from bird's eye view for the development impact fees, if you can imagine, the city of Shafter grows by 4 times. The population increases by 4 times. The commercial increases by 4 times, but the infrastructure stays the exact same. So no streets are upgraded. The water system remains the exact same. No wells are dug. No reservoirs. you're going to be looking at a city with quite a bit of dysfunction. Now, that is an extreme case, but the impact fees, the intent behind them, though, is to ensure that that doesn't happen. And so the intent behind them is not only to provide the infrastructure to accommodate new development so that new development can, in fact, be able to function in the city, but also ideally to be able to grow with development as well too. And so, as I mentioned before, the first part of the study was completed in 2021. That was a public safety portion of it, and that included fire, police, and animal services. And then I did want to have Scott come in too. He has 35 years experience in this field, and he's going to go over a little bit about why Shafter is such a unique case for us.
Most of our bread and butter work is with cities that have vacant properties scattered around the city. And so there's development and vacant lots, and we're working to make sure that this remaining development pays their fair share and doesn't drag down the service levels to the existing community. Again, Greg gave a perfect example of if you never expand the library, at some point the library is just going to be dysfunctional. There won't be enough books, there won't be enough space, so on. But Shafter's also dealing with roughly 8,000 acres of fully vacant land. It could have been another city, except you were smart enough to annex that many years ago. We've got one other city that's very similar. And so we're well positioned to help Shafter recognize what they need to do. And that's Ontario. I don't know if you've probably all driven through the 60 or the 10 through Ontario, but pretty much everything south of the 60 is fallow dairy farms. It was the largest producer of milk for many decades. But all the farmers found out what their land was worth and up and moved their cows to Bakersfield and Arizona and everything like that. So they're also dealing with about 10,000 acres of basically vacant land that has no services whatsoever. They don't have any streets to speak of. What the streets that they do have are all going to be torn up as they don't meet any current definition of a street. They were just inexpensive streets put in by the farmers to get around the area. Same thing with water and sewer. They don't have a system. So they're essentially starting from scratch. They've got nothing. You've got that same area in East Shafter. They have nothing. And so we recognize that there's two areas of Shafter. There's the core city, which I believe you've been referred to a couple of times early in this meeting, and that's downtown Shafter and the surrounding areas. It's a city. It's there. It still needs some enhancements as it develops too, but not to the level of this vacant land. So that's why you've got two sets of impact fees. One of them is for the core city, which they should be a little bit lower because they don't need quite as many more arterials or collectors. A lot of them are in. There's a water system that's in. There's a sewer system that's in. And you even have police and fire there now. But what you're going to have to do is at some point recognize that all of these 10 to 8,000 acres need everything. And that's why there's two sets of impact fees. And I'm going to be blunt, the impact fees for the East Shafter area, the 8,000 acres of vacant land, is based upon the actual level of services that are needed. They're based upon all the master plans we've been given, and there are quite a few. We're not used to getting these kind of numbers of master plans from cities. So it's defined as to what's needed. It's not like you can just go, we'll adopt it at half, because then you're only going to half the infrastructure, and that won't be sufficient. So on those, you have a little less wiggle room on those, unless you were to sit down and go, let's take this project out. It's just saying we're going to adopt them at a lower percent. It isn't the answer. You're going to have to go down and say, well, we don't want this street. Let's take that out. we don't want this street, let's take that out. We're not gonna build that water reservoir and we're gonna have less water stored. Then that brings down the impact fees. But the developers know they're dealing with vacant land. They know that there needs to be infrastructure for them to build. That's, Greg used the word accommodate. And that's exactly what you're doing. You are gonna adopt impact fees that will accommodate their service needs. And it won't impact the core city. Again, they've got their own set of impact fees. So that's what makes Shafter unique. There aren't many cities we run to that have 4, 5, 6 times the amount of the core city in vacant land. And so it's a little more difficult.
And then one other thing I want to point out as well too is there's two things that the impact fees really do want to aim at. The first one is to protect the current level of service. And so, you know, with my example earlier with the infrastructure, if the infrastructure doesn't grow as development in the city grows, then the level of service will drop for everybody across the board. The other thing is too is that impact fees are limited on the things they can fund. So they can't fund existing deficiencies, they can't fund operational costs, and they also can't fund replacements. However, though, the intention behind it, though, is that you want to protect the general fund by being able to set aside money so that, for instance, if you need to have a reservoir because you've had 500 homes built, then you have the money for that. And the general fund then can be used to fix those existing deficiencies. So that is one other thing I want to point out. And also, what the previous firm had pointed out is that our job, as Scott had pointed out, is to identify a roadmap essentially of what development will need in order to be able to function in the city and for the city to continue to function. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as a previous firm had pointed out, though, it's the council's decision on what they adopt. We determine the maximum legally defensible amount that the fees could be, but the council, though, ultimately has to make the decision of what the appropriate amount of the fees should be, though. And so I do want to just point that out again. And so that's pretty much what we have for covering it from the high level view. Does anyone have any questions we can answer?
What are our, I guess I'll use water because it seems to be on this list. What are our current staff? What is our current water impact fee for a new unit?
We have well, the short answer is we do not currently have a development impact fee. We have a connection fee that we charge, but it's not an impact fee.
Okay, so is this in conjunction with the connection fee?
Yes.
What is our connection fee?
Depends on the mayor argument. It depends on the
Single family home.
Single family home in the core city would be $4,200 per house.
So again, proposed core city new fee would be $9,400 for water. Because you would have to combine the impact plus the connection. So I'm asking the question.
That would be correct.
If I can, a connection fee is another word for an impact fee. It's the same thing, and it follows the same laws. It's my understanding that our impact fee will replace the other one.
Again, that's why I'm asking the question, because some of this stuff we have already, right? We have impact fees or connection fees for water, for sewer, theoretically for trash. We do have current fees for, I guess I'm not sure what all of these are. So you have public facilities, I assume our public facilities, general government, I assume again, us. Okay. Library, assuming us. Aquatics obviously is us, and parks is a combination us and rec, or is that just us?
Just us.
So this does not, so if I'm building a home, this does also not include impact fees from schools, bonds, any of that. Okay. So a typical build out based on, well, let me go to the core. I apologize. A typical build out on the core is 10, 20, 30, let's just say $32,000 based on these impact fees for the core before schools assessment comes in. Does that a correct statement?
If you want to jump to towards the end of the presentation, which would be the third slide prior to the end, we ran some scenarios.
Is that this colorful thing?
Yes. So it's got the potential residential fee, core city.
This was not good.
Oh, no, it's good. It's just bigger. I like yours better. Yeah, use yours.
Say that again?
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so you have here potential residential fee, core city.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And so we broke it down in the different categories of fee description, and then the public facilities, and then the other fees that we would collect, which is the school, zoning, building issuance. So just on the core at the maximum amount would be 13, oh, let's just round up, 14,000. And then water, sewer, and traffic impact is another 19,000. And then we take all the other fees like traffic, the school, public safety that we've already adopted. That's another 15, I'd say 16. So the total would be 48,000. That's at the maximum amounts. Okay.
Okay.
And then it's a difference. Currently right now, it's only say 30,000. That's the current fee. So the difference is approximately 19,000. And then we took the liberty of doing a phased in option, which is the columns to the right, at reduced amount at just 25, which 50 and 75. So we only did 25, discounted, it's more of a discount, 25%. It's the 8,100. So you see those amounts. So the 75 is actually discounting 75 from the total amount that we have. So we only started with, which is actually a 25% of the fee. That would only be approximately $3,500 in the new fees. We're proposing to keep, we would keep the water, sewer, and the TIF, because that's where we have the most amount of infrastructure need at the proposed amount. So those would remain at the 19,000. And then the other fees would remain the same because we don't control those fees. So at a reduction of 75% from the maximum amount would be the 38,000. So it's an increase of 8,000 from what the current fees are today.
This is a good time for me to ask any other questions, comments, or concerns, council? That's a lot to take in, just FYI. That's
That's why we're doing an introductory.
Mhm.
There'll be more discussion on this because we've not had these fees before. And this is the first time we're rolling out the study. And so we know there's going to be more questions, more information. So we just wanted to present it to you as an introductory to future discussion that's going to come back.
Well, you have to look at the fact that it's gonna cost to have homes and future expenses. I mean, that's the thing that's frightening.
And the question we have to ask ourselves, somebody's going to have to pay for that,
That's right.
right? Whether it's the general fund or you
Seems-
develop it. This is all development induced, right? So we need new wells in the new area, plan expansion, all of that. It's a direct impact for that development induced. We didn't grow any further then that we would have no need for these fees to pay for some of this infrastructure. But
Mhm.
as we continue to grow, it's intended for that and grow to offset that cost, because otherwise somebody's going to pay for that. Even now, we've had to pay for some of that, like Gossamer Grove, that always only pay the traffic impact, the water connection fee. And we've not had some of these other fees at all, right? So by way of example, we had, say, the city facilities, the library or something like that, those type of fees, as we're getting ready to expand city services out at Gossamer Grove via the substation, any shortfall, we would have been able to use those impact fees to pay for that construction. And I'll go one more example is the police vehicles. So we adopted the development impact fees for fire, police, and animal control about 1.5 years ago. And in that time, we've collected a little over $1 million to date. That money is going to pay for the vehicles that we need to staff Gossamer Grove. And so it's a growth induced impact. And so we're be able to take it from the impact fees to pay for those vehicles. If we didn't have that, it would be the general fund paying for that growth induced new cost.
question I have. At the end of the day,
Mike,
the only question I have is just, at the end of the day, how much fees? If I'm gonna buy this house here right now, how much fees am I gonna pay additional or to the house?
So,
That matters really at the end of the day.
yeah,
As
so
a
if you're
consumer.
if you're looking at the core,
Mhm.
right? So I said the current development projects right now under construction, well, we have in Tulare Beach, Raju, or even Boffin's back here south of us. They don't have these, right? Nor would they. But let's say we had a brand new proposed housing development project, then these fees would
It's
apply.
like
So,
more of the vacant land.
so,
in
so just by the, if you look at the spreadsheet, if we adopted the fees as the study says, the maximum amount, right? Per one, the total fees with school fees and everything
If
else.
if I'm interested in developing right now today, so I need to hurry up and get my paperwork in before you guys accept this.
Right.
Oh, before this gets approved, correct? Okay, that's all I need to know. I mean, that's only first phase, but I know this is just introductory, so we won't
Yeah.
get too deep in.
But to answer your
dissect it.
question, Councilmember Alvarado, Mayor and Council, you know, full disclosure, the new impact fees would be the 14,000.
Mhm.
And then the sewer and water and the TIF is being adjusted, so the total amount would be the almost 49,000 per unit, which is an increase of almost 19,000 above what they're currently paying right now. But that's at the maximum amount. If we did at a phased in or discounted amount, which is the columns to the right, then it would be a lot less than that. Yeah. But again, the question is at a policy level is, you know, who's going to pay for that
Yeah, so,
infrastructure?
but normally
at the
this,
end of the day?
this is policy where consumer or the homeowner pays for everything or
It's-
sales taxes?
It's a
general
pass
fund?
through. All of these fees are passed through to the developer and they more likely pass it on to the home buyer.
Right.
And all of it gets, you know, I'm sure it's included as part of the financing. So if a home's value is say 350, more than likely the builder's gonna pass this, let's say that I'm gonna use the $48,000, that full amount will be now 398,000. So it's a balancing, right? Because as a city, we have infrastructure that we need to pay for. That's a result of the growth. But then we also don't want to discourage building in the sale of homes with new residents coming into the city. So again, at a policy level, city councils typically take a look at it from, okay, we get new residents, they're gonna be property tax, they're gonna live in the city, they're gonna shop, they're gonna eat, you know, so that's gonna offset some of that. So it's kind of a balanced approach. You try to take that in consideration. Those are the findings that at a policy level, councils would take to do a lower amount or even a phased amount, right? But those are all, like I said, policy decision and discussions that you take, and we'll do the analysis and provide you those scenarios like we've done here, some preliminary examples.
I have a question. So with this increase, it would close that gap completely, or is it gonna be over time? Like, is there a period of time that it's gonna end up where it
Raise it.
balances out, I guess, in a sense? Because I know right now, right, we're not getting the full amount of it, right? We're spending more than what's coming in. Is that correct?
So,
I can't say that's true.
No.
yeah, but any growth induced infrastructure needs, the city has paid and it hasn't been passed through the develop, or it was negotiated via the development agreement that the develop pay for certain improvements.
Okay.
I think the only one you can say that we're on a negative is with police department. We pay for that. A majority of that comes from general fund or our sales tax generation, right? But as of today, our enterprise funds are not at a negative. They're not at a loss, right?
No, no, I'm correct, but I'm talking like, what I'm saying is like, as far as our, like everything, all the services that are incorporated into here, it's not breaking even, is right? Or it is?
So it's not,
Based on what we've been presented with
so it's not for services.
for services, yes.
It's not. So development impact fees, you cannot use for
For service.
operations.
Got it.
For services.
Okay.
It's
okay.
for projects.
For project, okay.
Yeah, so we'll typically, these studies are updated every 5 years.
Yeah.
Or like in our case, you know, we did our general plan some 20 years ago, we're getting ready to do it. That will lead us to do update our master plans or put together new master plans that will evaluate all the growth areas based on the new zoning and where we see different type of growth. And then the master plans will evaluate what are those needs we need? Additional wells, new sewer lines, water lines, streets, signalization, on and so forth. And then those type of projects are then included in the study, and that cost is distributed to the different areas and say, okay, well, this is what the fee is gonna be, and that's how we come to what that amount is based on the projects that we see we're gonna need as part of that growth. And so that's what Scott, our consultant, was saying, that it's not simply a matter of lowering the amount arbitrarily, but rather it's looking at the projects proposed to be paid from these impact fees, that we would take that out. So we might say, okay, you know what, it calls for a signalization at this intersection, you know, we're gonna defer that. Right, and let's say it's a cost of $5 million, right, because right away and design and all that and everything. So we take out that project and we say for a period of time, we're just gonna do four-way stop. So you take that project out, that lowers the amount. Right, and so that's how we would be able to do that. Yeah, but it's all project specific, and it's not an arbitrary number that was just put together. Whereas the CFD, the prior presentation, because that money is for operations, is based on more of the budgetary, what it costs to provide the service. And then it's divided by the amount of the homes being built out. Got it?
So what it comes down to, when you're ready to buy a home, then they should be telling you that you're gonna pay these fees, and that causes the value of that house to be as such.
Exactly.
You
The
have,
purchase
you
price.
know what you're buying,
Right.
and you know what you're paying for.
Yes.
No further questions, council?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so as I said, Mayor and Council, there'll be more to come on that. But I know it's a lot to digest for now.
A lot. That does, we did not clarify that on item number 2. That was item number 2 on the agenda for introduction of draft development impact fee nexus study. On to item number 3, which is review and discussion of enterprise fund analysis for sewer and water funds.
Sorry, Mayor and Council, as we've just gone through the budget process and doing an analysis of the sewer and water enterprise funds, we want to bring to your attention that provide some historical background into the enterprise funds. As I said, during the budget process, we did some analysis in terms of increased cost from operation supplies, capital projects that we need to do in terms of replacement of its existing infrastructure. And what our analysis shows is that we need to take some proactive action because in the future years, these two funds could potentially go into the red if we keep our operational costs continue to increase and our revenues don't grow with that. And so what we're going to present to you is an analysis that we've conducted to provide one background, sort of kind of the cause of where we find ourselves, run some projections of what we see in the future with regards to increased operational costs and then the need for capital improvement projects that would replace existing infrastructure. And then at the end, it's just to give you some takeaways and some further analysis, research that we at the staff level would need to do, looking at how we're going to pay for some of this via grants or other sources like that. So we have our finance director, Roger Sanchez, Deputy Public Works Director of Operations, Marcos Torres, and Mike James that will be tag teaming the presentation. So with that, Marcos.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. As City Manager Gonzalez had mentioned, here's a brief outline of what are we going to be going over this evening. Our profiles on water and wastewater, our regulatory and operational challenges, as well as our financial health. So this is a brief background on our water system. Currently, the city has 6 active wells with granulated activated carbon treatment plants for 123 TCP, as well as 1 standby emergency well. 5 are located within the city core area, servicing the core and the wonderful industrial park. 1 is located in the Minter Field Airport District, as well as we're hoping to get another well online by the fall to service the wonderful industrial park. There are currently 5 storage water tanks ranging in sizes from 750,000 gallons to 2.3 million gallons. We have 3 distinct pressure zones, what we call the core city, East Shafter, and the wonderful industrial park. The residents at Gossamer Grove are currently serviced by Oildale Mutual Water. We have over 118 miles of water mains, over 1,000 gate valves, 830 fire hydrants, 3,300 water meters, all servicing approximately 4,900 service connections.
It's kind of a cool little summary.
So this map shows just how spread out we are. The yellow shade is our Shafter city limits, and our blue border is actually what we call is our water sphere of influence. So we're spread out to multiple areas, to the west, out to Maple, south, all the way to the Cherokee Strip on the west side, and of course, the wonderful industrial park and the Minterfield Airport District across Highway 99 there. So this graph is our gross water production over the last 10 years. As you can see, we've been steady, and this is mainly attributed to water conservation, water saving fixtures, and occasional wet winters. The largest dip that you see there in 2015, that was mainly due to the drought. The state mandated a lot of the utilities to conserve water, so this is when the first year we were active in communicating that with the public. Since then, our annual average has been around 1,565,000,000 gallons per year. So this is our well production from last year, 2023. As you can see, the majority of our peak usage is during the summer months, between May and September. The average day demand for the year was at 4.1 million gallons per day, with a max of 7.8 during the July 24th day. So some service and funding challenges that we've seen throughout the last couple of years have primarily first dealt with TCP removal cost. Even though the city received a grant to build these facilities, it did not include the operation and maintenance side. So since 2017, since the last well received treatment, we've seen these cost increases and we have a better handle. Typically, you're looking at around $250,000 worth of carbon media changeouts every fiscal year. And this is for 2 wells. We've also seen PG&E rates increase as well as labor and construction costs. And we also have to deal with aging infrastructure. Approximately 25% of our existing water lines are asbestos concrete pipe that are roughly 50 to 75 years in age. So in today's dollars, replacing those lines are around $125 per linear foot. So kind of to put it into perspective, if we were to place those 25% water lines, we're looking at about $20 million. The replacement for wells, those are typically with included TCP treatment are in the range of $5.5 million, and storage tanks are around $4 million. And we also have to deal with higher water quality standards. The EPA every 5 years sets a list of unregulated contaminants that public water systems need to test for. So this results in higher sampling costs and additional testing with a potential of increased treatment. The city also deals with the lowering groundwater table. Over the last 20 years, water levels have dropped approximately 100 feet in some areas. So this is something we need to be proactive on. And also, as we've mentioned, we have currently 4 new tracks being developed. This is approximately 680 new homes that are going to be needed service. So we need to be taking into account that. So before we move on to the financials, are there any questions with the historical?
That lower groundwater table, 100 feet, huh? Man, that's
Over the last 20 years, correct.
we've been lowering our wells, the pumps or the bowls.
Councilmember Alvarado, yes, that's been our, one of the approaches we take is we lower the bowls, but it's even by lowering the bowls, when the groundwater table lowers, the water that well can produce is lower as well. So, the well has to work that much harder to produce the water that the customers are used to receiving. Plus, it also affects the water quality we've actually had to prematurely shut down, 2 wells due to elevated nitrate levels, experienced during the groundwater, lowering.
So do we get bigger pumps to accommodate the lifting? Or we just stay as?
Pumps help, but there's, through the pipes that you have, there's only so much water you can
Okay.
pump through them.
Okay.
So, sometimes upsizing the pump doesn't really, yield better results.
Okay, thank you.
Did we see any changes in the last 2 years with the amount of water that came in? Any changes to the water table?
No, in fact, we, the city manager and I, had a meeting with SWID in North Kern, last week, and, we're not experiencing, benefits of the, wet seasons that we've had, just because, until the state decides ultimately what the, what the future of our groundwater, pumping is, I mean, people are going to pump aggressively until they're told not to.
Got it.
So there's still, the ag around us is kind of business as usual. And so that's why our groundwater, our groundwater levels haven't benefited.
Thank you.
Marcos, you said 25% of our main lines are 50 to 75 years old,
Correct.
and it's gonna take, at today's dollars, 25 million to replace
Roughly 20 million, yes.
20 million. When should we start on that? I mean, cause that's not gonna get better, right?
Good pipe.
Correct. Yeah, we have a certain, an allotment every fiscal year into our water, mainline replacement, so we're tackling that, but, if other projects come along, the other needs, and, we also gotta take into account, rates.
Because, I mean, prices aren't gonna go down, that's just gonna keep going up and stuff like that, so that's a little scary, but thank you.
Oh, no, nothing further. Continue on.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'd like to give a brief summary of the financial conditions of the water fund. So this chart provides a 24-year historical rates. We raised, if you notice the red lines, that's when we raised the rates. So for 9 years, from 2000 to 2009, it was an amount of $23.50, and this is for a typical single-family home. If the other dotted line is just for your perspective, historical, that is as a point of reference only. If we had tied the rates to the consumer price index, that's what the rates would look like. Instead of a 63.70 at today's dollars, it would look to $104, $105. So that's just a perspective on how tying back to the consumer price index. The next chart provides operating revenues versus operating expenses, historical perspective. The blue line is the revenue, and the red line is the expenses broken down by labor, M&O, utilities, and internal charges. One thing to point out is the increases that we've seen due to inflation and other factors. But also at the next year's budget, we estimate that the revenues will not be sufficient to cover the operating expenses. Why the changes? This attempts to provide a summary of the changes between the fiscal year 22 to 25, next year's budget. And as you can see on the labor, M&O, utilities, and internal charges, that explains the increases on between different years. This other chart takes a higher level. It takes a longer term, but also provides the capital projects, the capital expenses. So on the blue line, it shows the operating expenses. The orange is the debt payments that we've done, and then the capital expenses. As you can see on the revenue side, it is not sufficient to cover once you add the capital expenses. This is one of the reasons we have the connection fees to cover some of those capital items. One of the interesting points is in the early years, the operating revenues were not able to cover the operating expenses. If you notice on the year 07, 08, 09, and 10, those are some examples. And now we're getting back to that issue in the upcoming year. These are the future capital projects. If we look into the future, what we are expecting to on capital projects, as you can see, the water meter retrofits, well 11, those are some of the examples. Now, once we combine future years with operating expenses with the capital projects, then we can see that we are not able to cover on the water fund the operating expenses. That's what we estimate. And once you look into the capital expenses, that gets a little bit more difficult. The red line signifies a $300,000 gap as a point of reference. This is a quick summary of the same information that I provided on the water, on the operating expenses, labor, M&O, utilities, and internal charges. The thing to keep in mind that is, I feel is the most significant is on the right side, the 6-year compound annual growth rate. You can see the growth on labor, M&O, and the total operating expenses at close to 11% over a 6-year period. With that, if you have any questions on the water financials.
Council, questions, comments, concerns? Okay, hearing none.
So next would be going over our wastewater system. The wastewater system is currently composed of 12 lift stations, 10 in the core city, 1 in East Shafter, Minter Field area, and 1 at Gossamer Grove. The system is composed of over 1,500 sewer manholes, over 101 miles of sewer mains consisting of clay, HDPE, ductile iron, and PVC pipes. And we've been discharging into the regional wastewater treatment plant operated by North of the River Senator District since the year 2000. Again, this is a map of our sewer system. The yellow is the Shafter city limits. The Shafter trunk line on Shafter Avenue, that first started in the year 2000. Our wonderful industrial park, that interconnection was in the year 2002, and 2016 was Minter Field and Gossamer Grove connections.
There we go.
So this is a graph of our average sewer flow, million gallons per day. The growth rate since the year 2000 has been approximately 20% over these past 23 years. The orange shade on the bar graph depicts this trend, while the green above shows our right of excess capacity into the plant. As you can see, we initially started with a 2 million gallon per day discharge capacity, which was later increased in 2015 to 2.5. So in the near future, the city will be faced with some servicing challenges that we must plan for. Since originally constructed in 1999, the shared wastewater facility had its fair share of upgrades. In 2009, the plant was permitted to expand to 7.5. And in 2015, the city agreed to up their capacity right to 2.5 million gallons per day. Currently, there's a plan underway to expand to 10 million gallons per day by the year 2029. It's important to point out that although the treatment plant has not reached its full capacity, per our current discharge permit, the district is required to comply with 80% removal of biosolids of effluent water and a monthly average total effluent of 10 milligrams per liter of nitrogen, as well as continuing to expand and promote new wastewater recycling opportunities. There have been some competing priorities with North of the River. We've seen that, typically when you're in dual partnerships, some cities, we're growing at a slower rate than they are. So there's that, resulting in possible others contributing to more monies than they need to. So that's been a challenge. Another key is, as in water, we have aging infrastructure. 25% of our makeup is sewer clay lines that, again, are 50 to 75 years in age, with an average cost to replace of about $100 per linear foot. So again, this is approximately $13 million. We've also had our manholes that need attention. Typical average cost to replace those are anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, depending on if they're in the dirt shoulders or in city streets. One thing the city has been proactive in is in the last 14 years, we've upgraded 10 out of the 12 lift stations. So those typically cost around $300,000, plus anywhere from 100 to 400,000 worth of labor work. So with that, that concludes our system detail and summary.
Council, I think the three of us have. Gentlemen, I don't know if you've had a chance to go to the sewer facility. If you haven't, I would definitely get connected with these guys and go check it out. I know it doesn't sound like a really interesting trip,
It is interesting.
but it actually is really interesting just to understand how the flow works and how that whole process works. It's disgustingly educational. Let me say it like that. But it would be good to know, and we've had that trip before, so definitely get connected and do it.
Council members, I'll start again with the financials for the sewer side. This is similar to the water, the rates, historical rates. It gives a 23-year history. As you can see, there were no rate changes for about 16 years. And if we had tied as a point of reference only to the consumer price index, the rates, it would be shown on the dotted line. So that's the difference. We only seen one rate increase in 2017, and that's our current rate for a typical single family is $29.9. This gives the historical operating revenues versus expenses. Again, on the surface, it does show that we're able to cover the operating expenses. However, once we include the capital projects, then it's a different story. This attempts to explain the variance again from the year 22 to 25, and it shows the most prominent labor cost, M&O, and internal charges. Now we look at the bigger horizon. Now we're including the capital expenses on the wastewater side. And the 2015 is the expansion of the wastewater capacity. And as you can see, we're able to cover the operating expenses, but the capital projects are significant. For future capital projects, we can see the manhole coating and other projects. As you can see, those are our expectations for the future or projections. Now, once we combine the capital projects with the operating revenues and operating expenses, we can see where we stand with the operating revenues. Now, because of the treatment plant expansion, once we take into account the debt payment for that expansion, then we expect future expenses to rise significantly. This is a summary of the wastewater at operating expenses growth over a 6-year period of 7.4%. With that, if you have any questions on the financial for wastewater.
Council, questions, comments, concerns?
None.
I think the scary word here is the item 2, city must ensure that enterprises are self-funded. And so I know we're going to have this conversation. It's not a comfortable conversation to have, but we do need to look at that. And I understand that. So no other questions, sir, it's back to you.
With that, Honorable Mayor, members of the Chafford City Council, I'll conclude the presentation with the takeaways, at least from staff's perspective. The water and wastewater enterprises are facing significant funding challenges. There's significant cost escalations with respect to labor, electrical, and inflation costs. There's increased demand. Over the past few years, our development has been concentrated at the wonderful industrial park in Gossamer Grove, but there's been a considerable uptick in the core city when it comes to the development that we have to be mindful of. We also have increasing regulations. Water treatment standards are only going to get stricter. And then the wastewater plant upgrade that's been referred to will have much stricter permit requirements issued by the state. So So as the mayor pointed out, the enterprises have to be self-funded. We can't use the general fund or new development to subsidize the operations. And there needs to be funding commitments, not only for the operation and maintenance to pay our everyday bills, but we have to set aside reserves to invest in infrastructure replacements. So the plan going forward is to come up with a financial plan to stabilize the funding. And we actually have a financial plan in the works right now with the help of consultants, and we plan to conduct future working sessions with the council in the coming months to talk through those financial plans.
And so with that, Mayor and Council, that concludes our presentation. As I said, this is all introductory and there'll be additional information in future workshops with you. So we have nothing further at this time.
With that, there's nothing else on the docket for the evening. I'm going to look for a motion and a second to adjourn. Just for the record, Councilmember Rivera, thank you for joining us. I know you were working late. I have it at 5:02 coming in. I need a motion and a second for adjournment, please.
I'll make a motion.
A second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Espinoza, second by Councilmember Alvarado. All those in favor with aye.
Aye.